during an unexpected visit. Anthony casually announced, "This is where my parents live," catching everyone off guard. Behind him, his in-laws beamed with happiness, nodding in agreement. At that moment, I was in the middle of an online meeting. Quickly muting myself, I apologized to my colleagues and ended the call, a hint of irritation creeping in as I turned to face the door. "Why the sudden visit?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "My parents are here to help pay off the house," my father-in-law said with a proud grin. His statement was so absurd that I almost laughed. Neither he nor my mother-in-law had jobs, yet they stood there, fully supported by Anthony's unquestioning agreement. Disheartened by his backing of this unrealistic plan, a thought crossed my mind: divorce. "I'm leaving," I declared, shocking the three of them. With a $6,500 monthly mortgage hanging over us, I couldn't help but smirk as I began packing for a business trip the next day. Suitcase and bankbook in hand, I prepared to leave. "Goodbye," I called out as I walked toward the door, planning to transfer the house title to Anthony. The idea of a fresh start filled me with a strange excitement. I'm Mary, a 45-year-old graphic designer who became independent 4 years ago. Since then, my business has flourished, and I've been blessed with numerous projects, earning significantly more than before. Now, I live in a luxurious high-rise condo. 2 years ago, through Patricia, my former boss and her cousin, I met Anthony. He was kind and honest, having been single for a long time due to his struggles with relationships. At the time, my business was booming, and I had just purchased the top floor of this condo, doubling it as my office. Marriage wasn't on my radar, but Patricia insisted I meet Anthony. When we met, he was surprisingly youthful for his age and incredibly gentle. We hit it off, getting engaged within 8 months. Although my parents had passed, my brother and his wife joined me at the family gathering, which also included Anthony's parents and cousin Patricia. Despite the mostly smooth meeting, my sister-in-law's comment, "This seems stiff," lingered in my mind. I didn't think much of it at the time, but now, looking back, I wished I had listened. After we got married, Anthony moved into my condo, and we began our life together. His job was grueling, requiring him to leave before dawn and not return until after midnight. He earned only a quarter of what I did. Seeing him so exhausted, I suggested he might want to find a less demanding job for his health. His reaction, however, was fierce and full of anger. "Are you suggesting I quit? Do you think less of me because I earn less?" It was our first real argument, and I was taken aback by his intensity. We had never fought before. Feeling guilty for unintentionally demeaning his job, I apologized sincerely. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to belittle your efforts. I'm just really concerned about your well-being." Anthony relaxed and apologized as well. The argument was quickly resolved, but after that, it became harder to bring up the topic of changing jobs. Anthony started coming home even later, sometimes spending half the week at the office. I worried about his health, but he seemed to love his work, so I focused on making our home as comfortable as possible for him. One evening, Anthony brought up his father's medical bills, explaining that his mother was in the hospital with back pain. "Could we perhaps increase the money we send to help with my dad's medical expenses?" he asked gently. Facing his parents in the hospital room, I sighed internally but didn't hesitate to agree. I had no parents, and our household mostly relied on my income. Although Anthony contributed a portion of his salary to his parents, the exact amount he kept for himself remained unclear. Despite his minimal contribution, it was clear he was providing sufficiently for their needs. When he asked to increase the support, I found it hard to say no, especially in front of his parents, who expressed their gratitude. "Anthony, you're kind, thank you so much. It's a big help," his parents said, looking at us with appreciative smiles. Under their gaze, I reluctantly agreed to send more money. Afterward, my in-laws began requesting funds more frequently for various reasons beyond medical expenses. Despite wanting to refuse, I found it increasingly difficult to do so. Knowing I would likely say no, they turned to Anthony, who had a soft spot for his mother's requests. Time and again, he agreed to send more whenever she asked. One day, after we sent my in-laws off in a taxi, following his father's hospital discharge, Anthony and I returned home only to find his parents waiting outside. It's difficult for Dad to climb the stairs, so we thought it would be best if we stayed here until his back fully recovers, Anthony explained, catching me completely off guard. "You can't just decide that without discussing it with me first," I protested, surprised by their sudden arrival. My mother-in-law frowned, and my father-in-law stood defiantly at the door, urging us to let them in. "That's okay, right?" Anthony said, glancing briefly at me before averting his eyes. It was clear that they had already discussed the plan without me, and I was left feeling more isolated than ever. I reluctantly agreed. Fine, you can stay until you're fully recovered, and ushered them inside. As they settled onto the sofa in our living room, my father-in-law looked around and remarked, "This place is nice. Our house is 48 years old and falling apart." My mother-in-law added, "Yeah, it's showing its age." Anthony nodded in agreement, clearly hinting at a potential extended stay. While I couldn't deny that their presence might ease the financial burden since I was already supporting them, the thought of living under one roof wasn't exactly thrilling. Renovating old houses is quite trendy these days. Have you considered that? I suggested, hoping to steer the conversation toward an alternative solution. "Yeah, maybe," he replied, non-committally. 3 years into our marriage, which should have been the honeymoon phase, Anthony and I barely spent any time together. We hadn't even gone on a honeymoon, and the condo that I had bought to double as both my home and office had become more of a burden than a sanctuary. It was manageable when Anthony was out at work, but with his parents around all day, the dynamics were becoming increasingly difficult. "If we're going to live together, I'd rather move into their house and keep this place solely as an office," I suggested, but my resistance made the topic of permanent cohabitation fade for the time being. However, even months after my father-in-law's discharge, my mother-in-law showed no sign of wanting to return to their own home. Their belongings slowly overflowed from the guest room into the living room. One day, I noticed Anthony's dad had gone bowling and seemed perfectly healthy. "Anthony, your dad seems fine now. He even went bowling today. Maybe it's time for them to consider going back home?" I ventured, but Anthony's response was sharp and immediate. "What are you saying? Sending my dad back with his bad back is cruel. What if it gets worse?" His tone was defensive, his voice raised, as if louder words would somehow make his point more valid. His tactic of asserting dominance was becoming all too familiar, often putting me at a disadvantage, especially since my mother-in-law always sided with him. This dynamic continued for 3 years. I handled all the household chores while my in-laws went out to enjoy themselves. Despite my father-in-law's apparent recovery, there was no indication that they planned to return to their own home. One particularly hectic day, I told Anthony, "Sorry, I have a meeting at 2 p.m. today, so I'll be eating lunch in my room." "Okay," he said. I set my lunch on the table and prepared for my meeting. My mother-in-law, without looking up, dismissed me with a simple, "Leave the dishes for later." As the clock struck 2 o'clock and my online meeting began, the door suddenly burst open. Anthony, flanked by his nodding parents, announced loudly, "This is where me and my parents live." I quickly apologized to my meeting participants and ended the call, my frustration bubbling over. "I told you I had a meeting at 2 p.m. I grumbled, heading toward the door. Calmly, I asked, "Why are you doing this all of a sudden?" My father-in-law's smug response hit me like a punch. "We'll pay the mortgage, so you can leave." Suppressing a laugh at his audacity, I simply replied, "All right, I'll leave," surprising all 3 of them with the news of the mortgage, $6,500 a month. The idea of moving forward with my plans brought a hidden smile, though my face remained composed, fully aware of the gravity of my decision. Fortunately, a business trip was scheduled to start the next day. Armed with my meticulously packed suitcase and bankbook, I headed for the exit. "Goodbye," I said, bidding farewell to the home that had become a battleground. My first order of business was to transfer the house title to Anthony, brimming with excitement about the changes to come. I checked into a hotel, eager to start a new chapter. The first thing I did was contact a property agent to start the process of transferring the house, including dealing with the mortgage. The success of the transfer would depend on Anthony's ability to handle the payments. If they proved too much, the alternatives would be either a lump sum payment or selling the property. I also instructed the agent to find me a new place that could serve as both a home and an office. Given that my work was primarily remote and having a dedicated space for client meetings was essential, the agent quickly found a suitable location about 30 minutes away. It had excellent security, and after a brief visit, I made the decision to purchase the luxurious apartment, seeing it as a well-earned reward for my hard work. In the meantime, I stayed in temporary accommodations, and once everything was ready, I hired a professional moving company to handle the packing and relocation. During the move, my in-laws and Anthony were present, and unfortunately, they made several disparaging remarks about me. One of the movers, sensing the tension, remarked, "You have a difficult family," leaving me momentarily embarrassed. A week after settling into my new place, I received an anxious call from Anthony. His questions about the mortgage transfer revealed that he had only just realized the full extent of the situation. In the background, I could hear his father loudly insisting that I return immediately. despite their earlier demands for me to leave. Anthony, sounding confused, asked, "But we're getting a divorce, right? It's unfair for me to handle the mortgage if you're the ones living there." I reminded him of their clear message for me to leave, playing back the recording from the day they had intruded on my meeting. I had taped it for documentation. Anthony was shocked, having forgotten about my habit of recording meetings. Undeterred, I explained the impending mortgage repayments, which were subject to a credit check. Anthony, clearly unaware of the details, inquired about the monthly payment, leading me to laugh. Despite my previous explanations and showing him the documents, he seemed clueless about the $6,500 monthly mortgage. His astonishment was palpable, and he was left speechless. This prompted his mother to intervene, questioning the amount and asserting that Anthony's salary should be enough to handle it. What she didn't know was that Anthony had not shared the true details of his salary with them. His mother boldly asserted that they would no longer assist me financially. At this, I couldn't help but burst into laughter, which visibly annoyed her. Remaining composed, I decided to clarify the situation. "It's $6,500 a month," I stated plainly. "What, $6,500? Is Anthony's monthly salary that high?" she exclaimed, clearly shocked. "That's absurd," she scoffed. "Anthony has been sending us $5,500 every month. If his salary is $6,500, he'd be sending us nearly all of it." "Stop lying," she said, unwilling to accept the truth. Remaining calm, I explained, "I'm not lying. The mortgage is $6,500. Exactly." I directed her to the evidence. "Look at the shelf by the living room entrance. You'll find Anthony's salary slips there. If you don't believe me, check for yourself." She eyed me skeptically, accusing me of fabricating the details, but went to verify the documents anyway. In the background, I could hear Anthony trying to intervene. Then, her tone shifted to surprise. "What? There's not even $5,500 here. Anthony, what's going on?" It turned out Anthony's actual salary was even less than I had disclosed. I heard his parents bombarding him with questions. Despite his attempts to explain, I calmly reminded him, "The mortgage is $6,500 a month. Take care." Whether they heard me or not, I ended the call. Anthony called multiple times after that, but I ignored him. I texted him, "Let's discuss this through a lawyer from now on." After that, my lawyer took over the communications, which quickly quieted down. I filed for compensation, and a response came through not long after. When I read it, I couldn't help but laugh. Anthony's legal team had crafted a statement that was almost laughable. They claimed I was at fault and that Anthony was the real victim, demanding compensation for emotional distress. All I could do was apologize to my lawyer, laughing at the absurdity. As the divorce proceedings continued, our relationship as a couple was still unresolved. I was eager to distance myself from a man who could make such unreasonable demands. Through my lawyer, I requested a meeting to discuss things in person, signaling my intent to handle everything officially. My lawyer handed me a letter from Anthony, asking to verify his claims and suggesting a meeting. I agreed, choosing a location far from where I lived, to take precaution. On the day of the meeting, Anthony didn't show up, only his lawyer, a polite young man, appeared. He explained that Anthony had been mostly silent during their discussions, allowing his parents to lead the accusations. The lawyer handed me a document accusing me of wrongful actions, but my lawyer and I quickly realized it was full of inaccuracies designed to paint me negatively. I took my time correcting each point, and the opposing lawyer seemed to understand, nodding along. "You've got solid evidence and a strong case," the lawyer remarked, clearly impressed. As the meeting wrapped up, he left as professionally as he'd arrived. My lawyer and I began strategizing on how to counteract the falsehoods and to explore further compensation options. About a month later, Anthony and his parents arrived for another meeting, clearly anxious. His mother shot me a glare as we sat down. "You seem to be enjoying all this trouble," she sneered. "Who do you think is responsible for all this?" I tried to lighten the mood. "You used to love coming here, didn't you?" I gestured to the upscale restaurant we were in. Her response was icy, and I could see her frustration mounting. Their previous lawyer had dropped them after the truth came to light. The restaurant staff had been briefed and escorted us to a private room. Once seated, Anthony surprised everyone by becoming emotional. "Shelley, I was wrong. Please help me. I can't go on like this. I'll do anything you say. Please come back," he pleaded, stunning his parents. I offered a kind smile, but remained cautious about his sincerity. As I watched the scene unfold, I subtly gestured to my lawyer. He handed Anthony a document. and when Anthony saw it, his face turned pale. Before he could even read it, his mother snatched it away in fury, glaring at me. The document, marked with stark red ink, meticulously refuted every claim Anthony had made. In a fit of rage, she splashed water on my face, calling me arrogant. To everyone's astonishment, I burst into laughter, finding the absurdity of the situation unexpectedly humorous. "Yes, it seems I wasn't the perfect wife," I quipped lightly. "I've shared the burden of household chores, endured criticism over my infertility, and had my earnings manipulated." As Anthony's parents continued their accusations, my lawyer presented a photograph that silenced the room. It showed Anthony with a young woman, Patricia, my former boss and Anthony's cousin, entering a hotel together. The shock was palpable. Anthony was too stunned to speak against the damning evidence. Patricia stepped forward, explaining the affair, and the room fell silent. With the truth now out in the open, I handed Anthony the divorce papers along with the compensation documents. He began to cry, and his parents, equally shaken, had to confront the reality of their son's actions. A month later, Patricia informed me that Anthony and his parents had moved due to financial strain. Anthony's salary was no longer enough to support their previous lifestyle, and they were seeking reduced living expenses. Interestingly, the compensation for my troubles was covered by Patricia's parents. In an unexpected twist, Patricia found love with Anthony's former lawyer, drawn to his clear-minded decisiveness. Embracing these new developments, I began blogging about my experiences. This opened up new writing opportunities. Since the divorce, I've been courted by a business executive I met through work. Our relationship has grown into something more, and he recently proposed that we live together. As I prepare for our date tomorrow, reflecting on everything that has happened, I sit before my computer, certain of my decision and ready to embrace whatever comes next.